I just started recording. I'm just going to give up on the camera. I'll set up StreamYard next time, and we'll just run with that.
All right.
But
Oh, sorry, my dog's barking.
no,
Bob.
I got two sleeping right behind. Actually, three. I got one right next to me, and then
Yeah.
all right. So the only thing I'm going to be reading is this opening statement, and then after that, it's just
Okie
going to
doke.
be me. So I might look up scripture, and I might look up whatever if it fits. But I'm not here to. I'm here to just talk. All right, so I want
Okay.
to thank you for allowing this opportunity for us to go through an extraordinary topic like can you have truth, reason, and meaning without God? I would like to begin by stating that my goal tonight isn't to win a debate. Instead, it's just to merely have a friendly conversation. I hope it gives people confidence to believe that Jesus is the truth and the ability to understand that without him, we cannot reason and could not find meaning in our lives. Now, as for the question we will be discussing, I can first begin by stating that it's clear we all live as if truth exists, and that it is both real and objective. We all reason, we argue, we debate, we correct, we teach, and we learn from each other. Now, my hope is that this evening will be no different, and that by the end, we have a better understanding of where we each stand on this. Now, it is also my belief that we all act, or at least desire to act, as if meaning matters. We see this within our own lives and within the lives of others, whether we know it or not. Now, with that, I'm going to define the three topics of the conversation. First off is truth. Truth is what corresponds to reality, whether we acknowledge it or not. In order for something to be true, it must hold up to the laws of logic. Next is reason. It's a faculty of the mind that allows us to recognize logical consistency, and draw valid conclusions, and think in accordance with reality. Now, I will argue that for this faculty to be reliable, it must have a rational source. Last but not least is meaning. It's a function of life that gives it purpose. It's not merely a personal feeling, but instead it's the answer to the question, why does this matter? Now, throughout this conversation, you'll see me dip into a few philosophical arguments, but understand the intention of these isn't to convince you that God exists. I've accepted the fact that just about everyone who believes in God does so, not because they heard like something like the teleological or fine-tuning argument, but instead because they had a personal experience. So with that in mind, let me begin by doing the opposite of what I know to be effective. I'd be remiss if I didn't state why I'm doing so. So my purpose is for you to understand that while these arguments aren't meant to convince you that God exists, they are meant to act like a set of keys. My hope is that they'll unlock your heart and convince you to take God's possible existence seriously. And now to the first of these arguments, it's did the universe have a beginning or is it infinite? Those are the only two options. There's no third option. Either there was a starting point or there has been an infinite chain of moments leading up to this moment. Now, if the universe were truly infinite in the past, we would never arrive at this moment. You cannot traverse an infinite number of moments to reach the present. No matter how far you go, there would always be more moments to cross. And yet, here we are. Because we are here, we are left with no other conclusion. There has to be a beginning. Now, a beginning requires a cause, not just any cause, because the cause would have to exist outside of time, space, and matter. It would have to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. If it brings about a beginning, it must have the ability to choose. If it were just a blind force, the effect would be eternal, just like the cause. But since the universe began, the cause must be capable of initiating, giving it a go, for if that makes sense. Now, a force does not choose when to act, it simply acts. But a person can exist and then decide to do something. So we are not talking about a force here. We're talking about a personal cause, something capable of making a choice. Now that I hope that I've established that reality itself points us toward a personal and material source, we can return to the things we're trying to use in this conversation. That's truth, reason, and meaning. Now, many people claim a godless universe, yet while doing so, they still argue as if truth, reason, and meaning are binding. And they interact with others as if logic is merely a brain-dependent function, yet they expect others to follow it as if it were universal law. And they reason using tools that are, by definition, transcendental, while denying that these tools are grounded in something transcendental itself. They treat meaning as something real for all people to pursue, yet fail to account for where that meaning comes from. I would argue we are seeing the consequences of that in our culture today. And we could discuss that if you'd like as well. Now,
Oh, yeah. I think that's a really relevant point and something that's very crucial.
Yeah. Now, I've touched on why things are, and we can begin to understand why it is that we recognize truth, reason, and meaning at all. You see, logic is universal. It doesn't change. It's not something we vote on, and it's not something that evolves. It's discovered. It's not invented. Whether you believe in the transcendental or not, that makes it binding. But if logic isn't grounded in something beyond us, then it has no authority. If it is just a product of the brain, then it is subject to change or to simply be wrong. If that is the case, then no one is obligated to follow it. At that point, we're no longer arguing about truth. We're just simply expressing our preferences. But we know that to do anything with others is to agree that logic is universal and binding. Now, I next want to talk about meaning. What is it that you live for? A child, a spouse, your family, yourself. No matter the size of your circle, we all seem to live for some type of meaning. But meaning requires grounding as well. It requires purpose. Now, many find meaning in love. We seek out someone or something in order to give or receive it. But something that must be understood about love is that it cannot be forced. Love must be freely given and freely received. And with that freedom comes the risk of rejection, and with rejection comes suffering, and at times injustice. If meaning is real, then some things truly matter more than others. And if that is true, then some actions are truly right or truly wrong. They're not just preferred. Now, if that is the case, then those truths do not come from us. Instead, they stand over us. Now, with all the risk involved in pursuing truth, meaning, and reason, we find that these are not just tools handed down to us by evolution. For that to be true, we would have to show that evolution reliably tracks truth. But as we've talked before, it doesn't. At best, it tracks survival, and yet truth is what we seek. Knowledge is what we gather, and meaning is what we desire. So now we have two lines of reasoning. From the beginning of the universe, we arrive at a timeless, spaceless, immaterial personal cause. From logic, we arrive at something universal, unchanging, immaterial, and rational. Now, these are not two different answers, they're the same answer. Personal, rational, immaterial, unchanging source of reality. That is what we mean by God, not some sky daddy, but a God capable of grounding the very things we are going to use in this conversation. Now, Scripture tells us that this is not an unknown force. It tells us that all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are found in Christ. It tells us that God is not a God of confusion, but of order. It tells us that in him we live and move and have our being. Jesus says that he is the way and the truth and the life. So I place my faith in him because the Logos is not just a concept. He is the revealer of truth, the foundation of reason, and the giver of meaning. Now, without him, we are using tools we can never justify. But with him, truth is not just an illusion. Reason is not an accident, and meaning is not a preference. It's just reality. All right, that's it, man.
Sweet. I like all that. Some really good points in there. There's some things that honestly, I don't quite understand your definition of parameters, so
Yeah.
I might have to ask more questions. I would say for myself, I start with what can be seen. I openly admit that on many things I come from a premise of faith, right? Empiricists would like to deny that he comes from a position of faith because faith is a big slippery word. Sometimes its definitional parameters become so broad and so wide that it's, so to say, undefinable. It's like when Latter-day Saints say, well, translation also means revelation. They redefine the word for what Joseph Smith did under their new, theological dogma, trying to justify what history just simply can't answer. But I also believe, our methodologies to come to our conclusions matter. So reality, as far as I can tell, is kind of the final court, right? What can be tested? What can produce predictable value, predictable power? And, like the double-blind study, the scientific method. And if it can be falsified, then I have a higher degree of confidence. No, I can't prove the sun will rise tomorrow, but I have a high degree of confidence it will. And that's kind of how I look at it. I'm more of a empiricist, naturalist with a strong reflex toward pragmatic rationalism. But I don't treat reason as sacred either. I don't treat it as something that's infallible, because we can reason ourselves in all kinds of ridiculous things, and we have. I see religion as an evolved strategy and trait that is uniquely woven into the fabric of what it is to be a human being. And some of my atheist counterparts, agnostic brethren, they tend to see it as a virus. Even the old Christopher Hitchens religion poisons everything in his famous book, which I love, and I love his rhetorical flourishing, but I disagree with it. I totally disagree with Richard. I think religion is woven into the architecture of what it is to be a human being. And we can see that with David Sloan Wilson. He wrote a great book, Darwin's Cathedral, on multi-selection theory. And even on chapter 3, he goes over Calvinism and how it saved Geneva, right? And brought a city that was in chaos and anarchy into order, and how in groups started virtue signaling to each other. And virtue signaling is probably the wrong word because it has so much political weight. How about in group behavior that was supported and that proved that you were part of the tribe, of kindness, of compassion, of order, of like discipline. And so the group was able to survive in just instead of pure anarchy, right? They at least had some rules and boundaries. And then we create religion. The most successful religion today, I think you and I would probably agree at some level, is capitalism. I'm a capitalist. uh, um, but capitalism has, as an idea and a concept that people behave in and execute in the market in, has filled more bellies, put more roofs over more heads, more clothes and more backs than any other ideology or system in all of human history. Even the Chinese practice it at some variable level, despite being in a communistic society. They have a semblance of a free market system. France, I was just over there last year. They have some semblance, even though they're a socialistic architecture. They have a kind of free market system. There are shop owners everywhere you go, so it's like multiple. You could say, what do you call it? Not CPUs, multiple little. It's not one central hard drive, right? So if one fails, something will come in, and the whole system doesn't collapse. It's multi-diverse. Uh, anyway, it allows trade, allows commerce. We can build empires and businesses. We can build political parties, and to me, that all falls under the branch of religion. The radical left would like to pretend they are free of superstition and supernatural truth claims. I think you and I would mutually agree that they have their plenty share of supernatural truth claims in doom and gloom mythology. The end of the world is coming. Environmentalism, the oceans will rise, and a man can be a girl and a girl can be a man. They have their supernatural truth claims just the same. They just dress it differently and pretend that they are above religion or above those supernatural Christians, ridiculous Christians. So, and that way, I think the architecture of belief manifests itself everywhere. We even have a high hangover for monotheism. We have monophilosophical arguments, like let's say utilitarianism, libertarianism, liberalism, LGBTQIA, critical race theory. We look at the world through the lens of just race. We have a monophilosophical hangover versus a polytheistic hangover. Some of that is starting to shift, but not a lot. That's kind of how I look at it. Any questions, or was that clear?
Nah, you're a unicorn though. Just about every.
I'm a unicorn.
Yeah, you're a unicorn. You're like the most unicorn person I've met when it comes to this type of argument or this type of subject.
Fascinating. Tell me.
Well, I know quite a few atheists personally, and or agnostic atheists would be agnostic to atheists. I'll say that within that spectrum in which they're willing to deny God, his existence, or the type, a personal relational God at least. And just about every one of them's a communist.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact,
oh my gosh,
if you, I'm just guessing. I have no clue. I don't even know if they even keep stats, but I would be willing to bet that the vast majority of outspoken agnostic to atheists are pretty close to, no matter what, they're Marxists without question. So
fascinating.
Yeah, it's a common thing. Now I have, before we get into the topic at hand, I have a pretty wild comment for you, and this is something that I have a really good friend he's basically a communist, and I love him to death, and we talk for hours. We've had quite a few conversations. And I actually agree with him on this subject when it comes to capitalism. I don't agree with you at all. I'm not a socialist. I actually do like capitalism. I don't want to say that I don't. I think capitalism essentially replaced slavery, and it's just in a different fashion. Have you ever heard of neocolonialism?
Yes.
So I'm a believer that the way that we operate capitalism within the West is neocolonial, and so essentially what we're doing is we have the more secular these nations have gotten, the lower the fertility rate has gotten, and as the fertility rate has dropped, they've had to replace that with third world labor and third world populations in order to keep up with their social welfare systems, and obviously that's bringing in different cultural issues, of course, and but we're essentially robbing the most ambitious. We're robbing the intellect. We're stealing the brain intellect of these countries. Plus, we're stealing their raw resources, and we're refining them for them and selling them back to them. So essentially, we're robbing the third world of this world. You know, the Southeastern Asia outside. China's trying to do the same thing, of course, but China kind of does it within their own selves too. They're kind of self digesting their own population. But uh, do you understand what I'm trying to argue here?
Yes, I've heard the argument uh, several times in different forms.
Okay.
Uh,
What do you think of that?
I think it misses a lot of data. I think it has some great talking points, and it points out some data realities and truths that are truly barbaric and awful comparatively. We live in a first world paradise. If I were to believe in a sin, it would be the sin of ingratitude, where I get to flip my finger and my shit vanishes. I put my garbage out on the side of the street and it vanishes. It doesn't pile up, right? Uh, when I think of communism, I think it goes like it's great on paper. It's a fantastic idea that everything is shared. And what is it? To each according to his need and according to his ability, right? Something like that to Mark's statement. It sounds great on paper. I think, though, in action, it is always bloody hell. It resorts to totalitarianism because it goes against what it is to be an evolved primate. We live in hierarchies. We are fine tuned for hierarchies. Dominance displays. Women are usually in I would say competency hierarchies, linguistic hierarchies. Men are in dominance hierarchies. Dude, you're nosing the heck out of me. I know you want to be petted, but it's really annoying. I'm a big newfie poo here.
Yeah.
Um, when we look at a monkey tribe, it's very hierarchical. When we look at human tribes, they're very hierarchical. When we go to nation states, they end up being, whether it's a communistic system or a capitalistic system, very hierarchical, right? It's just the way it keeps developing. So when we outsource labor, I agree that it's tragic in some ways. But at the same time, let's take Vietnam, for instance. We outsource labor very cheap to Vietnam, but the life expectancy of the average Vietnamese, even in the 1980s, exploded working in the factories versus the fields, the rice paddies, you know, fighting with, all the kind of different diseases that they did. The life expectancy doubled. China, the life expectancy doubled. Africa, the life expectancy doubled. Capitalism in its varied forms that entered into these systems allowed people to play multi-diverse games besides the agricultural era or the industrial era that moved to these different countries that allowed them to play more games. Even in the 1800s, people's life expectancy started exploding, especially after discoveries like washing hands and things like that. But even before that, 1800, before 1800, 25% of all children, there was a rough spot in the 1700s, 25% died before they reached age 5. And that's pretty significant. Uh, Now the poor among us are obese. We'd mutually agree the industrial complex of food is created so we are addicted. And we have probably mutual arguments there. But I see it as more diverse. Um, it's more complex. I would mutually agree with you that capitalism amok is just the Scrooge ethic. It just hoards wealth. More and more power, more and more wealth, regardless if it's a communistic system or a capitalistic system, tends to accumulate to fewer and fewer people over time. It's like the game of Monopoly. If we didn't get bored and we played the game of Monopoly, let's say we went a month or a week, whatever it took, eventually one person would own everything on the board. That's the biggest flaw in capitalism. Uh, and so there's no perfect system. Capitalism needs to support a socialistic infrastructure, and I don't see it any other way yet. AI is probably going to rewrite the entire system. Capitalism will be thrown out. I have no idea what's going to replace it. But yeah, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And I didn't talk all over the place.
Yeah, it does. It does. My kid just got home, but yeah, AI is going to be. I think there's going to be some blood loss because of it, but I think there'll be some
Yeah,
revolutions. Yeah, again, like I said, capitalism is the best system we have. We don't have a system that's going to, perfectly operate. Communism is far too open to corruption, and capitalism the same. But capitalism tends to sort itself out. But it also, like you said, it consolidates power.
yeah,
And we've moved away from the '80s in which we broke up the businesses. Like the bells and such. But
yeah. You
yeah,
think of,
it's
let's say,
a
the horses. Uh, I think AI is going to revolutionize even worse. Like a whole infrastructure, a whole economy evaporated in 20 years.
oh yeah.
Carriage makers, saddle makers, horseshoe makers, horse breeders, people who made roads for horses, stable makers. A whole industry essentially collapsed in 20 years and became irrelevant. And I see AI doing similar things to major swaths. And I kind of see the dive of female fertility and male testosterone a little bit differently than the modern social cultural dynamic lens. I tend to view it through culture, environment, and biology. And those three forces have pushed us into where we are today. And that's another long conversation.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of try to merge this convo into the subject. So essentially, uh, trying to remember the second to last thing you said. I kind of lost track. Uh,
I apologize. I was talking about capitalism, I think,
yeah,
multi-diverse systems. It all ends up like monopoly. Yeah.
yeah. So essentially, I think I was trying to go towards was well, let's go ahead and just start with secularism and stuff and how it's
Okay.
lowered fertility rates and things like that. So essentially, whenever uh, oh, I kind of remember what I was thinking, but I'm going to stay with where I'm at. All right,
Okay.
so I would say back in the '60s, that's when obviously things. Oh, I know exactly. I really do want to say what I was thinking. Okay, so
Okay.
you were talking about how the horse industry basically collapsed because of the revolution of the car.
Yeah.
Um, so the problem is that led to the Great Depression. I'm not going to say it was a key ingredient for it, but it was definitely one of the major variables. In the Great Depression, what took the entire world was in a big depression, in the late 20s through the 30s, and it took World War II to get us
Right.
out of it, and we never. It took them really until the 60s to get out of the depression, and that's what I mean by blood loss. AI is going to. Uh, it's going to definitely create a complete change in our economies, without question. My kids are already preparing for it. I've got adult children. One of them's a nurse. The other one, she's going to be a dog groomer, or she is a dog groomer. And so essentially they're picking professions. Like one of them has a boyfriend. He's going to be an HVAC repair guy, or actually he just graduated school for HVAC repair. And
He's
so
going to do great.
yeah, and
He's going to do fantastic.
so rather than going to college and getting jobs that are going to be replaced by AI in 10 years or 5 years or 2 years, they're getting jobs where we're they're quite a bit more secure, and they're a little bit less
Right.
approachable by AI. But back to the secular fertility rate, that it's kind of with the more secular we become, the more the loss of I would say, like, everybody's trying to get too comfortable, so rather than having children, they're worried about whether or not they can have that. They're materialistic. We all have to worship something. We either worship God, or we worship money, or we worship success, we worship power, we worship something. And the less that we worship God, the more we're focused on personal comfort, that whatever it is, that reward system that you still need to use, and I don't pretend like we don't have what people call primitive desires, for success, for love, for all these things, that I have different justification for it than maybe yourself, but the further from God we get, the more we have issues with fertility, the more we have issues with, types of crime, the more we have issues with identity, the more we have issues with all these things that are cultural negatives. And the Bible kind of points it out. It says that they will call the good evil and the evil good, and I see that coming to fruition. And that was actually a prophecy. I don't remember where. I think it was in Isaiah, but I could be wrong. But it,
Right.
And we see, it's Romans 1. I know better. It's Romans 1. And
Romans.
yeah, good old Romans.
We're not sure who wrote Romans. Yes.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. I think even the secular scholars like Bart Ehrman would tell you that Paul wrote it. So,
Most likely Paul, yeah.
Yeah.
Acts is written by Luke. Romans most likely Paul, but it's not definitive.
It's if you took a poll of even secular scholars, it would be 90+% Paul.
I agree with you.
You get into Colossians and Ephesians, that's when it gets, are you a conservative
Yeah,
scholar?
Titus.
Are you
Yeah.
It's just like Hebrews. I don't think anybody says that Paul wrote Hebrews. I think, but the one thing about,
I apologize. It was Hebrews I was thinking of, not Rome.
okay,
Yes.
yeah, Hebrews.
Good correction.
No, I don't think there's a
Yes,
conservative scholar
good
that's going to
correction.
argue that Paul wrote it. Hebrews, it's either Timothy, Luke, or Apollos. I think it's Apollos, but that's just a personal opinion. But but Hebrews is beautiful. It's a beautiful, highly Christological
Right.
book.
Get my
But
dog. I can hear you. I got my headset.
oh, you're good. So, but what I'm trying to get to about cultural drift, the fertility rate, for instance, I think in South Korea is less than 1 per woman. That's pretty. You can't recover from that. I don't think they recover from that at all. I think
No, most people are in demographic decline. Most first
Yeah.
world nations, even second world nations, are
yeah,
in demographic decline.
and
Uh,
so I don't see that
I
as a
look at
big
it through a
thing. I
totally
think
different lens.
the reason why I say that is because the further you get from God, the further the further you get from procreation, the further you get from you know worshiping God, of course, but instead of worshiping God, you're worshiping materialistic things that only bring you temporary satisfaction. They don't bring you permanent. It's like a drug, basically. You buy a car, and you know this just as well as I do. We go out, we buy that nice, Mercedes, or we buy that nice Jeep, or whatever it is, and it's awesome. Or we buy that boat, and it's awesome, and then it's not.
Right.
You're stuck with it for 3 or 4 years. Or a boat, good luck getting rid of it until you pay it off.
Right.
And so we
And you take it out 4 times a year.
yeah, and thank goodness I've never bought a boat. I've wanted to, but I've not
Oh yeah.
pulled that trigger. But you know what I mean. So we seek
Yeah.
gratification no matter what. And the beauty of God, and I'm not saying this is an argument for God. I'm just saying it makes more sense on that one side. And that's kind of where you get to meaning. What is the meaning of life? What are we living for? And in my opinion, outside of God, I live for my family. And
Yeah.
I'm extremely looking forward to having grandchildren. And
Yeah.
I've got 4 children. They're all between 20 and 25. It's going to happen eventually. But the thing that sucks is my children are so much different than the way that both of us grew up. Probably, I grew up as soon as I turned 16. I got a car and I got a job. My kids, man, only one of them got their license at 16. The other ones, they pretty much waited until they're 18 to 20. And one of them doesn't even have his license, but he's autistic, so I'm not expecting that to happen. But they just seem to not be in a hurry to do anything, they're not in a hurry to
Well,
start life. They're not, they're kind of they're kind of just cruising, you know, and eventually they'll definitely find their groove. Don't get me wrong, they're great kids, but I have my expectations for grandchildren is years from now. So it's just fun.
yeah.
But
Well, I'm gonna go with you half the distance. I'm gonna read, if you can't see this. This is from the book The Moral Animal,
all right,
and I'm gonna read this little excerpt from you where I agree with you, and it actually quotes scripture. It's a fascinating book, Evolutionary Psychology by Robert Wright, written in like 1994. And even though it's considered to most people ancient, the data still bears out. So like for me, if I can see data that is repeatable across time, culture, socioeconomic levels, and even the sexes, and across dogmas, religious belief systems, I can say, well, this is true enough. And this is a fascinating. Um, so going back to we're never satisfied. We're not satisfied with the boat. We're not satisfied with the car. Um, and this is Robert Wright. All these assaults on the senses, there is a great wisdom, not only about the addictiveness of pleasure, but about their ephemerality. The essence of addiction, after all, is that pleasure tends to disparate from and leave the mind agitated, hungry for more. The idea that just one more dollar, one more dalliance, one more rung on the ladder will leave us feeling satiated reflects a misunderstanding about human nature, a misunderstanding, moreover, that is built into human nature. We are designed to feel that the next great goal will bring us bliss, and bliss is designed to evaporate shortly after we get there. Natural selection has a malicious sense of humor. Uh, it leads us along a series of promises that keep saying, just kidding. The Bible puts it quite eloquently. All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet his appetite is not filled. I think that's Ecclesiastes. It has a little mark here. Remarkably, we go our whole lives without ever really catching on. The advice of the sages that we refuse to play this game is nothing less than an indictment to mutiny, to rebel against our Creator. Central pleasures are the whip that natural selection uses to control us, to keep us in its thrall, in its warped value system. To cultivate some sort of indifference to them is one plausible route to liberation. While few of us can claim to have traveled thus far on this route, the proliferation of this scriptural advice suggests it has been followed some distance with some success. What are your thoughts?
it's pretty solid, pretty solid. Um,
Yeah.
just to give you a heads up, I only got about 10 more minutes, and then I'd like to continue this. We'll actually just not get into the subject tonight. We'll just get into
Okay.
that like in tomorrow night or the night after. I'm always available at 9 o'clock at night. But
Oh, sure thing.
I'm enjoying this conversation, so I really don't care. So
All right. 10 minutes. How about this? I'll talk about the women's issue that
okay,
you've aptly seen in demographic decline. So we have it's not third wave, it's second wave feminism. Moving into third wave feminism, we have Gloria Steinem. Uh, to me, is one of the most revolutionary human beings in all of human civilization. She's still alive to us today. The ripple effect of her actions has liberated the other half of humanity. But it's about trade-offs. There's no real solutions, right? And I think most of us can mutually agree in that liberation, though. Well, how about this? Gloria Steinem's an asshole. Right, wrong, or different. She's kind of an asshole, especially to men. But she had some solid, valuable points about a woman being identified beyond her uterus and beyond her ability to procreate. And so women entered into the marketplace, but they were still held back because of reproduction. It's not just 9 months, it's 5 years. This creature is totally dependent on me. And of course, I'm being very reductionist, I'm being very abstract, I'm dispassionately talking about a human being. All that granted, because I love children, I love being a father, and have high MPI, male paternal instinct, but I'm going to talk about it a little detached. Um, so in 1982, women started obtaining more bachelor's degrees than men. It's kind of irrelevant. 1987, more master's degrees than. And in 2004, I think, I need to look it up again, more doctorate's degrees than men. So now women are able to enter in the marketplace. And the old, no, don't go off barking. The old basically trade-off was men provided resources, women provided partnership and or sex, right? Now women can enter the marketplace and they can obtain their own resources. And women are no longer competing against other men, competing against other women for those resources. because men uniquely held the keys to access of food, of wealth, of commerce, that sort of thing. So now that women can enter the marketplace, they're no longer competing against each other. Uh, and that main evolutionary drive as they enter in, and we become more of a capitalistic world, less labor, labor is outsourced. Men usually are in the domain of labor and physicality, less in the linguistic landscape, so to say. They're being outcompeted by their female counterparts. So nowadays, women 35 years and younger, 30 years and younger, as they enter the marketplace, are outcompeting their male counterparts in education and income. Not everywhere, not every domain, because they choose different jobs and different things. But now it's starting to outcompete their male counterparts. Men are drowning in video games and porn. That's a whole nother discussion. So that biological reflex to obtain resources, usually to secure safety and their offspring, has now been satiated, and they don't need a man to do it. So, of course, hypergamy, which is a natural reflex for evolutionary reasons, to keep a whole nother conversation. I need to be quick. We have 5 more minutes. Uh, it's shifting. The whole landscape, the whole environmental landscape of how we have evolved is shifted radically. We're not evolved to live in this new landscape. Uh, Men are no longer competing against other men to obtain women. Uh, they're competing against the market, and women are outpacing them in the market. Women no longer need men to obtain resources, which is the primary driver for partnership. Whether it's a water strider and it provides a carcass to another water strider, says, please copulate with me. But basically, please fuck me. Let's copulate, let's copulate. And it hands a carcass to a water strider, right? And is an exchange. In this female feminist liberation, we don't see a wave of women now taking men. And of course, there's always statistical outliers, but in general, women aren't taking men on dates, paying for that, and hoping they can steal a kiss at the end of the night. They still want a rich man. They still want someone that gives them the feeling of safety and of wealth, because that's how they're wired, evolutionary speaking. It's a reflex. And the whole environment, again, because of capitalism, because of individuality. That's another argument. The individual replaced the group, the tribe. We can even see it infiltrate our relationships. The woman is always right. The customer is always right. Just agree with her and you'll be okay, right? Uh, we now have relationships that are very narcissistic, socially, culturally narcissistic, men and women. It's no longer group or tribe. And of course, group or tribe to the extreme is communism, and individualism is just narcissism and selfishness. And so we're under different environmental pressures in this new landscape. Uh, and we see it bearing out in the marketplace of sex, uh, the battle of the sexes, which is just lose lose, and demographic decline. And I think that plays a role also. So I think it's multiple factors playing into it.
Yeah, I think.
Also, oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
you're
ahead. I
good.
talked too long.
Yeah, you led me into a minefield. Thank you. the so what I
Oh,
mean
that
by
went
that
out.
is the it's an interesting topic, and I'm not sure if are you a fan of Jordan Peterson or not.
Yes
Sometimes,
and no.
yeah,
I would say 70% of the time, I'm totally on board.
yeah,
And he is one of the most influential philosophers of our day, probably in the last 100 years since Nietzsche, in shaping culture and civilization.
yeah, especially
And I
with young
think
men.
people, yeah, I've read most of his books. I haven't read his last one, and I think it's a mix between profound wisdom on human culture and civilization and verbal vomit. Sometimes I think he throws in so many words it just can't make heads or tails of it. It's just sounds pretty, but it's just verbal vomit.
Yeah, the
So
he kind of touched on the subject in his interview with that Kathy. I can't think of her last name, but she was the BBC uh, journalist, or I don't know what her position was, but basically she
I
interviewed
haven't
him.
seen it. Feel
Uh,
free to send it to me. I'll watch it.
dude, you have no idea. It's probably the greatest interview of all time.
Oh,
He,
really?
yeah,
Oh, is that the one with the Channel 4 or whatever? You
yeah,
talked about
yeah, yeah,
free speech, like you're uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah.
You're
That
you're
it.
disagreeable.
I
Yeah,
mean, I
I have
think
seen that one.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to watch. But he touched on quite a few subjects. He said that women tend to hit the age of 30 and they realize that, that biological clock is ticking. You know what I mean? And now we have IVF, we have all these things that are available to us, so they can stretch it all the way up into their 40s anymore. But typically women will go in, they'll get all that education, and I don't know the stats, but I guarantee you the stats are not great. But they'll get this massive education. They'll work for 5 or 10 years, and then they'll either be unhappy with it or they'll leave. And a few of them will stick around. And he kind of taps into this idea as evidence with like she tried to attack him on why only one woman was a CEO of the whatever British, FTSE 500 or something like that. There was like one or two.
I remember that. Yeah.
And essentially it's because of what I just said. It's because women tend to their biological clock tends to tick, and they take a break from work. They might return to it, but then they kind of want to return to their family. Once you have children, you're like, if you have that opportunity to raise those kids, that's probably the best way. The woman is her natural position. And I think this is scientific. I mean, I think we can kind of behavioral scientists would agree with me that women are typically nourishers. They're typically caregivers, whereas men are more provider. And it kind of shows in the professions that we pick out. Like that's why women tend to lean more towards the medical field, because that is more of a, taking care of somebody. You're a caregiver, whereas men gravitate more towards a position of STEM and such. There's exceptions. There's just like you. There's unicorns out there.
Agreed.
So, but
women maybe more on the autistic spectrum tend towards more STEM.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a few like
even
that,
in Dubai, let's say, women are generally, even in a conservative Christian community, on average, in general, women are more liberal than their male counterparts. It's just how they're wired. They're more socialistic than their male counterparts. And it's a whole other discussion, community sharing, resource sharing, sleuthing, that sort of thing, whereas men are more singular focused. That's a whole other discussion. I know you got to go.
Well, I'm going to end it real quick. And then whenever you're available, just hit me up. We'll continue talking, and we'll kind of just like keep the topic at hand. We'll kind of, if you watch the Alex O'Connor, John Lennox interview, Alex O'Connor posited the most perfect debate strategy. He said that one person does an opening statement, and then a week later the other person does the opening statement, and then a week later the person does the rebuttal. And so we can operate like that. I think that's a fantastic idea. It gives you time to think and actually express what you truly believe. You don't have to just kind of like it takes the pressure off you. But and then we can like just bring our arguments and then just talk like this. That would be fantastic. Sure. So, and you'll be next, basically. You'll bring the argument to counter. I'll post this video on my YouTube and I'll send it to you, and you can watch it. That way you can study my opening statement and then retort to it.
Winning.
But
okay. That'll be great. And we can talk tomorrow. I have tomorrow off. My cute girlfriend is off in New York touring through Broadway.
Okay. So yeah, my wife's actually going out of town tomorrow, so I don't have a wife tomorrow, but I have to work. So
hey, winning. But, all right. Yeah, hit me up tomorrow. We'll plan a time, and
Let's.
And I'm all out of Scott. So
all right, man. Let's continue the conversation on women after you form your argument tomorrow. All right.
Okay.
All right, man.
Have a great night.